The man who kept a journal of every day with Barbara Streisand is now writing the hardest entries yet. James Brolin, who proposed 3 times before she said yes, recently told producers he can't commit right now. Their separate bank accounts are finally merging as medical bills mount. After their 25th anniversary last year, the couple faces their biggest challenge. Hollywood insiders reveal Brolin refused a $2 million role just to stay home. His next chapter might be his most heartbreaking. James Brolin was born as Craig Kenneth Brolin on July 18, 1940, during a scorching heat wave in Los Angeles. It was 103 degrees the day he arrived. His father, Henry, a successful contractor, barely made it to the hospital. He got there just 12 minutes before Craig was born. Henry ran his house like a strict machine. From the age of 4, Craig had daily chores and weekly reviews of his behavior. His mother, Helen, once worked as a film extra but never told Craig. She didn't want him to get distracted from school. Craig was a quiet child, partly because of severe asthma. At age 7, he spent 45 days in the hospital. Still, he had a sharp mind. At 9, he took apart and rebuilt his father's watch. Teachers noticed how good he was with mechanics, but nobody could have guessed how obsessed he would become with James Dean. At 15, Craig saw East of Eden, and it changed everything. Every Saturday for 6 months, he secretly rode his bike 17 miles to Griffith Park. There, alone, he copied Dean's walk, his voice, his look. In his room, he hid 73 James Dean clippings behind a poster. He saved over $200 from delivering papers and bought an 8mm camera. He filmed 24 silent reenactments with neighborhood kids. When Dean died in a car crash, Craig didn't speak for 11 days. His drama teacher found one of his short films and sent it to Uckler without telling him. It won an honorable mention from Nicholas Ray, the same man who directed Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. That moment sealed Craig's dream to act, even though his shyness made him throw up before every audition. In 1960, he was told to change his name. The studio said Brolin sounded too German. They even had stats. Short names with hard sounds got better recognition. Craig didn't want to do it. He had 7 meetings arguing against it, but the studio won. They gave him James because of his James Dean obsession. His dad didn't speak to him for over a year. His mom mailed his new headshot to relatives trying to explain. For 214 nights, James couldn't sleep without pills. And after all that, the studio told him he was acting too much like Dean, the very thing they'd asked for. In 1966, Brolin got small roles on the Batman TV show. First, he played a bank teller. The director liked how he dropped the money bags, so he got more screen time. Months later, another director cast him as the Eraser, not realizing he'd been on the show before. He even cracked 3 ribs doing his own stunts. Then Adam West picked him for a 3rd role. No one on set noticed he had already been cast twice. He was homeless at the time, living in a 1958 Chevy and using the gym showers at Fox Studios. In 1967, everything fell apart. He starred in The Cape Town Affair, a film he warned would flop. He sent memos about the bad script and cultural issues. No one listened. The film tanked. He was fired while visiting his mom in the hospital. Weiss, Fox demanded he return $11,400 in salary. He was broke for 18 months. He couldn't get work. He became a mechanic in Van Nuys, fixing cars for people who had no idea he was once a rising star. Then fate stepped in. A Universal executive brought his car in for repairs and was impressed by Brolin's work ethic. He offered him a screen test. That test led to the role that changed Brolin's life. He became Dr. Stephen Kiley on Marcus Welby, MD. The show started in 1969 and ran until 1976. Brolin played a young, motorcycle-riding doctor working with an older partner. The show became a huge hit. In 1970, he won an Emmy, then 2 Golden Globes. By its 2nd season, the show was the most watched on ABC. It tackled serious medical issues like cancer, depression, and Alzheimer's. One episode about homosexuality caused protests, but Brolin stayed committed to meaningful storytelling. In 1972, he took on a darker role in Skyjacked. He played a disturbed Vietnam vet who hijacks a plane. He acted opposite Charlton Heston. The movie was tense and dramatic, and Brolin made the character feel real. Critics said he played the unhinged hijacker perfectly, even though it was over the top. It showed he could go beyond the calm doctor image. Then came Westworld in 1973. He played John Blaine, a confident visitor in a theme park where robots looked and acted human. It was a science fiction hit that used early digital effects for the first time. Brolin's character is killed halfway through the movie in a shocking scene. That twist made the rest of the film even more intense. His performance gave the film depth and contrast. In 1979, Brolin took on horror. He played George Lutz in the Amityville Horror. He wasn't sure about the film at first, until he got spooked while reading the script. His pants fell off a chair by themselves. He took it as a sign. The film became a huge box office success, earning over $80 million. Brolin's performance as a man slowly unraveling was chilling. It reflected the fears of financial collapse and family pressure many people felt in the late 1970s. Behind the scenes, he and co-star Margot Kidder clashed, but the tension worked for the story. In 1985, Brolin showed his funny side with a cameo in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. He played a fake version of Pee-wee as a suave secret agent. It was a clever nod to his almost role as James Bond. At the same time, he starred in the TV show Hotel. It ran for 5 years and gave Brolin a stable career. He played Peter McDermott, the polished manager of a fancy San Francisco hotel. Each episode had new drama, new guests, and Brolin at the center. He even directed some episodes. He got 2 Golden Globe nominations during that run. It also brought someone new into his life. His future wife Jan Smithis guest starred while he was going through a rough divorce. Meanwhile, Barbra Streisand was born in Brooklyn on April 24, 1942. Her parents were Diana, a school secretary, and Emmanuel, a respected teacher. He made $4,200 a year, which was barely enough to support the family in their small apartment. When Barbara was just 15 months old, her father died from a seizure. The family had only $250 in savings and had to move in with her grandparents. Barbara never got to know her father, but later found a note he had written in her baby book. "I have a feeling this one is going to be special." In 1949, her mother remarried and Barbara gained a half-sister. But life didn't get easier. Her stepfather was cold and once told her he'd break her spirit. By 1958, at just 16 years old, Barbara left home. She had nowhere to go and no money. For a year and a half, she stayed wherever she could. Friends' couches, old cots, and even fire escapes in summer. She had one suitcase held together with tape, and inside were 3 outfits, 2 pairs of shoes, and 12 records. Even then, she kept up perfect attendance at school. She studied in libraries and diners, and worked part-time for 75 cents an hour. She only earned $17 a week, but made it last by visiting her mother twice a week just in time for dinner, so she could eat without admitting she was homeless. She wore the same coat for 3 years, fixing it herself and even dyeing it a different color with leftover costume supplies. By 1960, Barbara was working as an usher at a theater, making just over $46 a week. She watched the same play, The Sound of Music, more than 100 times. She memorized every scene, and before work, she practiced singing alone in the theater. One night, a stage manager heard her sing. Thinking she was an understudy, he asked who she was. She boldly said she was auditioning, even though she wasn't. On the spot, she sang for 3 casting directors who just happened to be nearby. 2 days later, she was performing in a nightclub for $18 over the weekend, double her usual pay. But the theater fired her for breaking rules. It didn't matter. She had just taken her first real step into show business. Up to that point, she had never had a voice lesson. She learned by singing in stairwells and subways, testing echoes and drawing small crowds. Later that year, she was staying with a friend, Barry Denon, in a tiny, overheated apartment. He convinced her to record 3 songs. They used an old reel-to-reel recorder, and Barbara had to stand still and stay exactly 27 inches from the mic. When they played back the tape, Barry dropped his coffee mug in shock. He said her voice was like nothing he had ever heard. He played the tape for 14 people in the music business. Some didn't believe it was real. One record executive thought it had been professionally engineered and refused to believe it was a teenager with no training. But the truth came out, and that raw recording later made its way into the Library of Congress. Then came the night everything changed. It was September 1960. Barbara, just 18, walked onto a nightclub stage in a $6 dress from a thrift shop. Her earrings didn't match. She had already been rejected from 7 auditions that month, often told she was too strange-looking. One producer even told her she had a $1 million voice but a 5-cent face. But that night, she sang Cry Me a River and followed it with a funny take on Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf. The crowd went silent. Then they clapped for nearly 5 minutes. She got perfect scores from the judges, the first time it had ever happened there. A harsh critic even wrote that her nose might become as iconic as her voice. Within 2 months, she had 23 paid gigs. She had proved that talent didn't need to fit the mold of beauty. In 1961, she made a bold move and changed her name, dropping the second A to become Barbara. She said it made her stand out. She kept her Brooklyn accent, refused surgery to change her looks, and kept singing the odd songs she liked. One freezing night, only 7 people came to her show. She didn't care. She performed as if the place was packed. She wouldn't change herself to fit in. And it worked. Then came Broadway. In 1962, she played Miss Marmelstein in a show called I Can Get It For You Wholesale. She had a 103 degrees fever the day before the big audition. Still, she showed up. The directors almost cut her big scene because it was too weird, but she fought for it. Opening night, the crowd made her sing it 3 times. She was just a supporting actor, but the reviews only talked about her. The newspaper called her the funniest thing on Broadway since Fanny Brice. She started out making $175 a week, but her contract was renegotiated 5 times. In 1963, Barbara released her first album. Columbia Records only printed 10,000 copies. They thought it would flop. It had no hit songs, just show tunes and ballads, but it sold 150,000 copies in 1 month. She had full control. She chose the songs. She even rejected a color cover and went with a simple black and white photo. It went against all marketing advice. That album won her a Grammy for Album of the Year. She beat Frank Sinatra. Some Grammy voters were so upset, they quit. In her short speech, she said, "This isn't luck. This is what happens when you don't listen to people who don't understand your vision." A year later, she played Fanny Brice in Funny Girl. Brice's daughter didn't want her in the role. She said Barbara was too Brooklyn, too Jewish, and not pretty enough. Investors pulled out more than $1 million when they heard she got the part. But Barbara crushed it. She performed the role 867 times, missing only 2 shows. Even when she had pneumonia, she didn't stop. She sang songs written just for her because her voice had a 3.5 octave range. In one scene, a sprinkler broke and soaked her, but she kept singing. The director loved it and added it to the show. When the show moved to London, critics were harsh, but by the end, tickets were being sold on the black market for £150, an outrageous amount at the time. In 1965, she signed a TV deal with CBS. It was worth $5 million for 10 specials. She was only 23, but the contract gave her complete control. CBS couldn't change a thing without her approval. They couldn't interrupt her songs with commercials. Her first special, My Name is Barbara, broke every rule. She started the show singing alone in the dark. Executives were terrified, but 71% of people watching TV that night were tuned in. She won 5 Emmy Awards. She even edited the whole show herself. The director later admitted he just followed her instructions. In 1968, Barbara Streisand stepped off the Broadway stage and into movie history. She starred in Funny Girl, playing Fanny Brice, the same role that made her famous on stage. The film exploded in popularity and became the top-grossing movie of the year in the United States. Barbara's performance was so powerful she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. It was her very first movie. Even more shocking, she tied with Katharine Hepburn, the only tie in that Oscar category ever. The film earned 8 Oscar nominations and confirmed Barbara wasn't just a stage star. She was now a movie star too. Years later, The Library of Congress preserved Funny Girl as a national treasure.